Estamos viviendo tiempos en que la libertad se está erosionando en distintos lugares y por eso a veces hacemos entrevistas con algunos de los liberales o los de los libertarios más importantes del mundo. Y uno de los pensadores libertarios más importantes del mundo lo tenemos precisamente en una videollamada. Se trata de Walter Block. Él es profesor de la Universidad de Nueva Orleans y ha escrito alrededor de una veintena de libros sobre temas filosóficos, sobre temas éticos que tienen que ver con la libertad personal. Vamos a estar haciendo esta conversación en inglés. Walter Block, it's a pleasure to meet you, even if it's at a distance. I've been reading your books for a long time. But please tell us, you take some indefendible positions. You defend the undefendable, and you've done it many times. Tell us a little bit, how did you come to defend the undefendable? And I know you started out as a progressive socialist activist in Brooklyn, in New York, when you were young, and then you became a liberal and you became a libertarian. Tell us about that transition before we actually go into some examples.
I went to high school with Bernie Sanders. We overlapped for 4 years. We were on the track team together. My joke about Bernie Sanders is that Bernie never ran away from much of anything. He didn't run away from socialism, even before socialism became popular, thanks to him in large part. He didn't run away not only from ex-convicts voting, but from convicts voting, people in jail. But there's one person he ran away from, and that's me. Why? Because he was one of the best runners in the city,
Mhm.
and I was a mediocre runner. So we'd start off at the same starting line, and he would run away from me. So that's my Bernie Sanders joke. I After I graduated from high school, I went to Brooklyn College, and Ayn Rand came to speak at Brooklyn College, and I came to listen to her and boo her. In those days, you would just politely boo people. You wouldn't cancel them. You would allow them to speak. And after her speech, there was a luncheon in her honor put on by the Ayn Rand Studies Club. And I came there. It was open to anyone. And I was trying to convert her to socialism. Actually, what happened is she converted me to free enterprise.
Mhm.
So that's how I became a free enterprise person, a libertarian, a classical liberal, whatever you want to call it. How did I get to write Defending the Undefendable 1? There are
Mhm.
now three volumes of it.
That's right, yeah. I have a number of them right here. I have Defending the Undefendable. I have the number 2. I have the Spanish version, whichever, whatever you want. I have them here.
Well, what happened was I was now writing my PhD dissertation on rent control,
Mhm.
and it was mainly econometrics, and I found it extremely boring. So what I would do is I would tell myself, if I do this equation, I could give myself one whole day off to do whatever I wanted,
Mhm.
and I would write about why we should legalize prostitution,
Mhm.
or why we should legalize blackmail, or why we should legalize whatever it was that didn't violate the libertarian axiom of non-aggression. And by the time I finished my dissertation, I had like 30 articles, and I put them all together in a book, and that was Defending the Undefendable #1.
Tell us your arguments. For example, in the case of prostitution, we still see that argument going all over the place. People believe that if you want to stand for women's rights, you have to ban prostitution, and you have a totally different argument. Tell us about it.
Well, I think the feminist movement is divided on that issue. Some
Yeah,
of them
that's true.
say our bodies are ourselves and we're adults and we can do whatever we want. And other feminists say, well, it's really deprecatory to women, it humiliates women, it shouldn't be allowed. My own view is with the first half of the feminists who say women are adults and they can do whatever they want as long as it's compatible with the non aggression principle of libertarianism. Now, we're not talking about having sex with children, God forbid.
Hmm.
We're just talking about consensual adult behavior. And now, look, I don't favor prostitution. I have a wife, I have a daughter, I have a sister. I wouldn't want them to be prostitutes. I don't think that's a good way to relate to people. But the question is not that. The question that the libertarian answers or asks and answers is, should people go to jail for that?
Hmm.
Yes, you should go to jail for murder, rape, theft, arson, whatever, kidnapping. but should you go to jail for adult consensual behavior? I mean, there's a whole other aspect of it is that when a man and a woman go to bed with each other, that's not a crime. And all of a sudden, if one of them pays the other one for the service, that is a crime. Why should the mere transfer of money for an otherwise legal activity render it illegal? It shouldn't. So I favor the legalization of prostitution, but not prostitution itself.
Mhm. What about pimping?
Well, the same thing. The pimp is just an agent. A lot of movie actresses have an agent. You probably have an agent. I don't know. I don't know.
I don't, but you know, I believe if I wanted to have an agent, whether you call it a pimp or whatever, why shouldn't I have one? Mhm.
Right. I mean, the agent gets you more gigs, more jobs, more
Mhm.
whatever, and the agent would get the prostitute more opportunities to earn a living. Uh, there are literary agents. I do have a literary agent.
Mhm.
Um, I
Oh,
have
so you
books.
do have an agent. I don't have one, but you do have an agent.
That's true. So there's nothing wrong with an agent. I bought a house several years ago. I had a real estate agent. Uh, Nothing wrong with an agent, and all a pimp is an agent. Now, a lot of times, what the pimp does is he beats up the prostitute. No, that's not good.
Mhm.
I don't know what the situation is in Mexico, but in the United States, prostitution is legal in most of Nevada, and
Mhm.
it's legal in many European countries. And there, the person in charge of the house of prostitution is, in effect, the pimp. Now, it's not legal in Las Vegas, but it is legal in, I think, in most of Nevada. And those people aren't beating up prostitutes. The the reason that there's prostitutes being beaten up is because prostitution is illegal and it's driven into the black market. But when it's legalized, it's the same thing with drugs or alcohol. It used to be when alcohol was prohibited by law, that we had bathtub gin and we had people shooting each other over alcohol turf. Now you want alcohol, you just go to the supermarket and you get alcohol. And it's the same thing with marijuana.
Mhm.
It used to be that when it was prohibited by law, that people would shoot each other over it. My understanding now is that Mexico is having a lot of trouble with drug gangs.
Mhm.
All you have to do is legalize the drugs, and all of a sudden the drug gangs go the same place as the alcohol gangs, namely that they stop. So the reason that the pimp has a bad reputation is because of the prohibition, not because of anything intrinsic to being an agent.
You asked me about Mexico. In Mexico, prostitution is legal, but pimping, depending on the state, pimping is illegal. So what they do is actually they take the brother, the father, or whoever happens to be near the prostitute, and then they take them to jail. But anyway, that's another issue. There were a lot of arguments and a lot of discussion about your position on slavery and voluntary slavery. Could you tell us about it?
Yes, that's a very, very controversial issue, much more than pimping or legalizing drugs or any of
Yeah.
that stuff. What happened was the New York Times was interviewing me in 2015, I think it was. I didn't realize that their hidden agenda was to show that Rand Paul was no good. And the
Okay.
thesis was Rand Paul is no good. Then he was a viable candidate for president. He might well be again this time, too. I don't know. The idea was that Rand Paul is a bum because he hangs around with idiots. And I
Mhm.
was one of the idiots. So I was explaining what is libertarianism, the non-aggression principle, private property rights based on homesteading. What's the view on unions? What's the view on free trade? What's the view on this? What's the view on that? And they weren't getting it.
Mhm.
And either they were too stupid, which I doubt, or they had a hidden agenda and they wanted
Mhm.
me to have a gotcha moment. So I used the atom bomb of libertarianism, voluntary slavery. And I said, look, suppose God forbid my son has a horrible disease and it costs $50 million to cure him. And I don't have anything like $50 million, even with my agent. I still don't.
Okay.
And Bill Gates, say a very rich man, is willing to have me as a slave, and he's willing to pay. He's willing to pay
$50 million?
50 million.
dollars?
$50 million to my son's what do you call it? Doctors.
Yeah, okay.
And and now I become his slave. I go to his plantation. I give economics lessons. I pick cotton, whatever I do, and he can kill me. This is not indentured servitude. He can whip me. He can kill me. I'm a real slave. Now the question is this a valid contract? And libertarians are very divided on this. You know,
Mm-hmm.
libertarians are divided on abortion. Ron Paul is pro-life, and Mary Rothbard is pro-choice. Libertarians are very divided on that one, and libertarians are very divided on the voluntary slavery issue.
Mm-hmm.
And in my view, this is a valid contract.
Sure.
And if it's not a valid contract, my son, God forbid, dies
Mm-hmm.
because Bill Gates won't buy my freedom. Now, how does this work economically? As in all voluntary trade, there's mutual benefit. I value my son's life more than my freedom. Bill Gates values my servitude more than the 50 million. So we each gain in the ex ante sense or in the sense of anticipations. Now, later on, I might regret it. Who knows? That's a different issue. When I'm being beaten, I might regret it. Well, maybe not. But the point is that that's a valid contract in my view. So
By the
what
way,
the New York Times,
I would do exactly the same to get treatment for my son, so or for my children.
yes, I mean, that's what a good parent does. They say that when there's a forest fire, the mother hen puts the chicks under her and lets herself be burned
Mm-hmm.
and saves the chicks. This is human nature to save your children. And what the New York Times did is they published this thing that said that I favored actual slavery, which
Okay.
is an abomination, which is one of the most heinous acts that people perpetrate on each other. So I'm not a real big fan of the New York Times, and I'm not real big fan of the Loyola University, the president of my university. If I tell you, if I were president and you were one of my professors and you were quoted in the New York Times as favoring slavery, I'd call you into my office and say, please tell me you were misquoted. Instead, this guy, he wrote an article saying, well, we're against slavery. Block favors slavery, but he's no good. So the bottom line here is that libertarians of my persuasion favor voluntary slavery, which is very, very different than coercive slavery.
And under circumstances, and if you decide to surrender your freedom out of your own freedom. But let me go to something far more normal. You defend private property. A lot of progressives believe that private property is an ill, that it's something that we shouldn't defend. You have always defended private property. Tell us about it. Why is private property so important to freedom?
Well, we need private property to make the non-aggression principle work. Look, suppose I go over and I grab your suit jacket. It's a very nice suit jacket.
Thank you. You have a very nice T-shirt. I like your Vancouver T-shirt as well.
Keep your mitts off that t-shirt. So I grab your jacket. The question is, did I violate your rights? It all depends upon who is the proper owner of that jacket. If you stole that jacket from me yesterday and now I'm just grabbing it, I'm repossessing it, you're the bad guy, I'm the good guy. On
Mhm.
the other hand, I never saw that jacket before. It's your jacket. So if I start grabbing it, I'm the bad guy. So in order to make the non-aggression principle work, and the non-aggression principle is the very foundation of libertarianism, you have to have private property rights. Otherwise, we can't distinguish between theft and repossession of private property.
Well, I do want to thank you. We are running out of time. I do want to thank you, and I want to invite our listeners to read toward a libertarian society, defending the undefendable, and the books that you've written, and they'll see that they're fun. Aside from being, they're being books that teach us a lot of things. Thank you very much, Walter Block, for speaking with us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, ok. Y a usted, amigo televidente, que hace posible este programa, se lo agradezco también. Esto es todo por hoy, pero no se lo olvide. Nos vemos la próxima.